When I'm out in the world and I may be placing an order at a coffee shop and someone turns around and they say, "Oh my gosh, you got me through some of my hardest moments where I couldn't sleep," or, "I had never thought that my body belonged in a yoga space until you told me that I could and to embrace my abundance." It's in those moments that I think that anyone who is committed to the work that they've done, they're going to do it regardless if anybody's watching or not. I remember the first yoga class I taught and no one showed up.
Well, hello there, and welcome to a very special interview, a very special episode of the Terri Cole Show. I just had so much fun talking to Dr. Chelsea Jackson Roberts, who you might know because she is an internationally celebrated Peloton yoga teacher. She's also a scholar, and she's highly regarded as a leader in a new generation of yogis who are passionate about expanding the visibility of who is commonly seen as teacher. So Chelsea brings her deep Midwest roots to the mat and style of yoga that is accessible to all bodies and levels of skill. She has been twice on the cover of Yoga Journal, featured in countless media outlets. She's got tons of celebrity clients, but really she's widely recognized because she does amazing work with yoga and teens, right? And making connections between literacy, development, storytelling, and yoga. So she founded Yoga, Literature, and Art Camp at Spelman College Museum of Fine Arts in 2014 after receiving her doctorate in educational studies from Emory University. She is so into people being liberated to do yoga and to do life their way. So I hope that you enjoy this interview with Chelsea as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. She is a bright, beautiful light. I am so excited to welcome Dr. Chelsea Jackson Roberts to the Terri Cole Show. Hi, Chels.
Hi, Terry. Thank you for having me.
I'm so psyched. I feel like we've been circling each other for years, and we are finally getting together in virtual real life. So welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
So many things to discuss. You had a baby. Your Peloton's, bright and shining star. You have so many things going on right now. But I would love if you would give my people just some background on how you got here. Like,
Sure.
whichever way you want to tell the story, but how did you end up here with yoga being such an important part of how you're helping heal the world?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I love that question, especially because I'm so committed to honoring my roots and always remembering where I came from and the parts that make up this whole experience that I'm going through right now. And I'm originally from Dayton, Ohio, and that's always important for me to mention. I grew up there. I went to school in Atlanta, Georgia, at Spelman College, historically Black college for women. And then after that, I went to New York City, and I was an educator. I was a child development major at Spelman. I decided to get my master's at Columbia in international education. And then I went back to Atlanta and I began teaching. I was an elementary school teacher for 8 years. I taught third grade, I taught second and first grade. And during that time, I just remember this overwhelming amount of stress and pressure, not just from my day to day as a school teacher, but I had experienced a very abrupt trauma. I lost my best friend to gun violence at that time, in my early 20s. And so I just was in need of something to help me navigate and make sense of the world that I was building as a young adult. And so while I was a school teacher, I found yoga and I went to yoga classes and I was just like, wow, this thing really makes me feel great. I can't really put my finger on what it is, but I know that when I do it, I'm feeling very whole. I feel present, all the parts of me, even the parts that I wanted to hide and not confront. And
Right.
so I would slowly begin to introduce some of the things that I would learn in my yoga class. I would introduce it to my elementary school students, and they loved it. We didn't always necessarily call it yoga. It may have been
Mhm.
stretching or a moment of silence. And so after years of teaching and integrating yoga, I decided to pursue my PhD in educational studies. And I wanted to know what would happen if I studied the ways that yoga and meditation impact how we understand, process, and share information, how we cultivate community. And I did it, through my dissertation. And fast forward to today,
Mhm.
I left the classroom. I'm in a different classroom. It's called Peloton now. I'm still a yoga teacher, and I'm still evolving as both a student, as a yoga teacher, as a mother now, as a wife, as a friend. Like, I'm evolving in so many different ways at this particular moment in time.
What I find so amazing and beautiful about your journey is you found this, but then you shared it with. I mean, I don't even know how many people you reach with like I literally
Millions,
can't even guess.
millions.
Yes,
Yes.
millions, and how you're really shining a light on and doing it your own way, right,
Hmm.
actually creating classes that are different, that are have
Hmm.
different
Hmm.
music to them. There's a different vibe to what it is that you're doing that is turning so many other people onto yoga, which has
Yeah.
traditionally not necessarily been a lot of people of color doing yoga.
Right.
That, of
Right.
course, is changing. And you've
Right.
been on the cover of Yoga Journal twice, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
you certainly have been at the forefront of this. But how is that for you to be creating safe spaces for bodies
Hmm.
of color in a different way?
Well, I hope so. I hope that I'm creating a safe space for all bodies. I can
Yes.
use my own individual experience, and that was being, a Black woman who found yoga, who walked into a space that I was the only person who had the body type that I had, who, just all of the different things, the laundry list of ways that we can feel excluded in anything that we're beginning for the first time. It can be scary, but especially a practice where our bodies are so centered, and it is this practice of acceptance. So to go into a space and ultimately you're hoping to feel like you belong while you're actually trying to cultivate this understanding of who you are is wild. And so, oftentimes I want to be mindful that I don't romanticize my journey of starting yoga, because it was actually quite challenging, especially as I started to move into the seat of teacher, not being mistaken as someone who couldn't possibly be the headliner for this conference. How can you possibly? So when you mentioned that, Terry, I appreciate you acknowledging the boundaries that I've moved through, the ceilings that I've been able to really open up for others, because it's just an opening. It's not broken through yet. And so when
Right.
I think about those experiences, and I think about, this being a microcosm, my experience as a Black woman showing up in spaces like these, it's a microcosm of the world, of our country, of the world,
Without a
right?
doubt. Without a
And
doubt.
so,
But also, Chelsea, when you think about what you're doing, it's hard being
mhm,
first. It's
mhm,
it's hard, even though it's awesome. But I can
mhm.
imagine, because you're doing so much good. But I can imagine the pushback, and I
Yeah,
don't know, right? I
yeah,
don't know what that is because I'm not
yeah,
in your experience. But I can imagine that the pushback, because you're so popular
yeah.
now, but in the beginning, and even now, like you said, you're headlining. You're literally
Mhm,
headlining these, like, Toronto. I mean, like,
mhm.
all the
Yep,
places.
yep, absolutely. And I remember when I was on the cover of Yoga Journal, I remember there being this controversy of, the Instagram or the Facebook comments saying that, how does it feel to be a token? And for me, it's like, if I'm grounded in the reality of the historical context of who I am in this world, in this country, in my community, and if I can say that this is my opportunity to be on a major publication showing that I belong here, and hopefully that can give someone else the confidence and the acknowledgement that they belong to, how dare I not take that opportunity? So, yes, until we see this revamp of resources and how things are allocated and how we have access to information, I probably will, be in that position where it's my picture. But that to me is a step, and that has offered me the opportunity to have spaces like yoga, literature, and art camp, where now we're normalizing that, yes, my teacher is a woman, a Black woman, a self identified, like whomever you identify as, maybe
Hmm.
you will find a connection where you thought that you didn't belong and you see somebody there waiting for you.
Exactly. All right. Would you tell us a little bit, though, about yoga literature and art camp that
Sure.
you founded this at Spelman College in 2014? Is that when it happened?
So Terry, I am so impressed and I appreciate that this has been a journey, and a lot of times it's almost like those musicians or artists where they're like, they're an overnight sensation. And it's just like, where did they come from?
Yeah.
And it's just like we've been doing this for a while, and yoga literature and art camp has certainly been my heartbeat. As I mentioned, I've been an educator for, as long as my mother retired from 35 years of being a first grade teacher. And so when I think about, I really started pretending like I was a teacher when I was a little girl. And I always knew that I was dedicated to education and understanding because that's what I wanted for myself. And
Mhm.
so yoga literature and art camp is that space that I wish that I would have had when I was that age. It's that space that centers our experiences, again, normalizing my story. When I grew up, Ramona Quimby was all the rage. Like, I loved Ramona Quimby aged 8. Like, these characters I loved, and it was nice to have a different perspective, but very often I was able to see a lens that was similar to little Chelsea Jackson from Dayton, Ohio. And I knew that it was essential for my own self-worth, for my confidence as I move through this world, for me to know that my voice matters and it belongs as well. And so that's what we did at Yoga Literature and Art Camp. It was my dissertation for my
Mhm.
PhD program at Emory. I thought that it was just going to be a dissertation and I was going to go on business as usual and become a professor somewhere at a university, but it was actually the participants in that study who, their parents, the community wrote back and said, well, when are we reconvening for this camp? And that happened. And my husband, Shane, we actually got married in 2015. And in 2014, we founded Red Clay Yoga so that we could ensure that our community were also connected to this work of yoga literature and art camp. And that as we have now moved to New York City, that it can still live with the seeds that we've co-created there with the community. So why LA camp?
So how beautiful though to have your partner
Hmm.
be like it sounds like your part that Shane was invested in
Absolutely.
your dream.
So invested, Terry, that he took a 200-hour yoga teacher's training when we were dating because he wanted to understand me more. He's just like, you're talking about, you know, wholeness, feelings, mindfulness. Like, he really was committed. And I think in that commitment, he realized the value of what it was that kept me coming back to yoga and
Mhm.
meditation. And now he's a yoga teacher. And now, it looks differently. We've done a lot of work around race, around community building. That's what is important for us, to make yoga practical, to make it relatable, and to make it make sense for us in the 21st century, especially
Mhm.
here where we reside in the United States.
Yes. I want to talk a little bit about I'm really interested in like family dynamics. I mean, as a
Hmm.
therapist, and your mom just finished her 500th
Oh my gosh,
yoga
yes.
class, correct?
Yes, she did.
So can we
When
talk
she
a little
hears
bit
this, and
about
she listens to all of my podcasts. Congratulations, Mom. Yes.
I was very impressed. But I want to hear a little bit about clearly your mother is very interested in you,
Hmm.
and it sounds like has always been. So can you talk a little bit about
Hmm.
that relationship because I find it's very important.
Whew, did you see how I had to take a deep breath? So yes, very connected. And now that I am developing this connection with Noble, I have so much more even grace for my mother through this process. My mom and my dad have been married for 50 years. This is wild to me when I hear myself say it. And as long as I can remember, I've always admired my mother because of her selflessness in a way that has been beautiful for it to be full circle, where she was my number one teacher. And now you just heard she got 500 yoga classes. In many ways, she has allowed me to be her teacher. And to me, that is a trust that she has done the work that my father and her did raising me, that she can trust now as we age, both of us, that she can trust me in the process. And so, my mother, to see her celebrate that and to see the woman who I embodied and saw as this is what selflessness looks like. And now for her to understand what it looks like to pour back into herself, because I think that she pours so much into me. I'm an only child, and she poured so much into me, whether it was taking me to piano lessons or cheerleading or band or wherever. She did so much. And so it is an honor to be able to take care of my mother in this way. Yeah.
Mm. And how that's so beautiful.
Thank you for
And
asking that question.
oh, I just love it. I'm so obsessed with mothers and daughters and parents,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's not to say, listen, if you didn't have that, of course, we also find a lot of replacement parents for those who didn't
Mhm.
have that mom,
Absolutely.
right? We find the other people. But now that you are a mom,
Mhm.
so how would you share your experience of becoming a mother
Mhm.
with us a little bit, and how has that impacted how you see your relationship with your own mother?
Yeah. So Shane and I have been married going on 8 years now. Or no, just celebrated 8 years. I'm losing track. And so when I think about how we waited to establish our relationship before having children, that was a risk that we took to delay the continuation of our family. And for me, it has made the becoming so much even more meaningful because I've
Mhm.
waited so long for this. And I've had decades of a yoga practice, and by no means do I have it all figured out. That's what's so beautiful about yoga. It reminds me that I'm forever a student. So it keeps me humble. It keeps me, I'm a first time mom, and I laugh about it because I do all the things that the first time moms do, I think, or parents in general. And so the dynamic that we've had, I think that we first gave birth to the dream that we co-created through Red Clay Yoga.
Mhm.
So we were able to cultivate in that way something that we poured into and committed to. And so to now move into this next chapter of actually a human being named Noble, to watch how the best parts of ourselves and to see us continuously work on the challenging parts of ourselves while be parents, to me this is the reward. Like, I feel like I've practiced yoga in order for me to have a lens that can see it in this way.
Right. So beautiful. And how does you becoming a mom impact how you view motherhood? You like, do you know what I mean? Like when you become a mother, it's like how you view
Mhm.
your own mother. Is there a shift in that?
Right, the grace, the reflecting back on the moments of, why did that happen in this way? Or I don't understand why, like even around fear and
Hmm.
being afraid, and what I learned about attachment and non-attachment through yoga, it's like in real life experience right now.
Yep. You know, I was going to ask you, you had briefly sort of referenced losing your friend to gun violence in your early
Hmm.
20s. So that
Hmm.
Missy, was that her name?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yes.
So you were roommates at Spelman, and there was three of you.
Hmm.
How do you think, I mean, that's a massive traumatic experience to lose someone, anyone at any age, to gun violence, right?
Hmm.
Is just horrendous. How did that impact you
Hmm.
in your life?
Yeah, so again, I'm from Dayton, Ohio, and anyone who's familiar with Dayton, Ohio, it's a small city, but it transitioned a lot. And I just remember being so proud that I had made it through Dayton, Ohio unscathed. It was like I hadn't lost any friends to gun violence. I actually had been in something right before I left to go to Atlanta, where there was gun violence, but I was not harmed in any way. And so when I think about, okay, I made it. And then you get to Spelman and you're told, like, you go to college, you get a good job, you do all the things that are supposed to keep you safe. And then it was like we were following all of these steps, and then this untimely, catastrophic, traumatic event happens. And I did not know what to do. And so that's where my yoga practice, where it had evolved from this purely physical workout to this thing that kept me going each day, to this practice that opened my mind and heart to go to therapy. This practice that reminded me that, there are going to be days where I can't stop crying. Like it was like this acceptance and not this resistance. It was this forgiveness of this moment through, when you go through grief where you may even begin to get angry. I started to blame myself, like I could have done something to prevent it. Right. And so my yoga and meditation practice supported me to really be kind and gentle with myself through that process. That was a life changing experience for sure.
Yes, and you were talking in another interview talking about how you guys kind of had plans
Mm-hmm.
to create
Mm-hmm.
things. So how are you honoring Missy's memory?
Absolutely. As you mentioned, the three of us. So it was Danica, Misty, and Chelsea. We were three roommates at Spelman. Danica actually went on to be the first Black woman to be Miss Georgia and made it to the top 10 of Miss America. It was actually during that time that Misty was murdered. And so Danica didn't even know at the time because she was competing. And I remember Misty and I were going to be roommates at the hotel to go and support Danica. And Misty didn't make that trip. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to go either. I remember Danica, once she found out later, contemplating not even competing because it was too tremendous. And we knew Misty was the pageant girl. Misty was the one who dreamt of being in pageants. And so we saw that through. When I think about Misty wanted to open a spa and I was going to be teaching yoga there, and to see that yoga literature in our camp is committed to young Black girls. One little girl I saw one time reminded me of Misty, and to see at Spelman College where it started, it was beautiful and full circle. And I think there are parts of Misty definitely always around during
Oh,
Wildlife Camp. Yeah.
it's so beautiful to. It's like Deepak talks about if you have something really painful happen to you, and if you learn something about yourself, and it's something that would help to lessen the suffering of others,
Mm-hmm.
that like it's really important to share that, and that's exactly what you're doing is
Mm-hmm.
helping to elevate the joy and lessen the suffering of
Mm-hmm.
others
Mm-hmm.
in the name of your friend, because it's that
Right.
is such a hard thing to go through at a young age. But we can either just those things can either just make us bitter,
Mm-hmm.
or we can figure it the hell out within
Right.
ourselves and then do something in the world. I wanted to ask you, Peloton is like a thing, right? This, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not just Peloton, it's the Lululemon of it all, the
Mm-hmm.
Wanderlust of it all. The
Mm-hmm.
you have had this whirlwind fame. It's one thing to work with famous people, but then it's another to sort of have a certain level of visibility to yourself, for yourself. How is
Yeah.
that for you?
It's humbling, and at the same time it reminds me of the commitment that I made initially, to YLA camp. All roads come back to YLA camp, of my why, of my heartbeat. And when I'm out in the world and I may be placing an order at a coffee shop and someone turns around and they say, "Oh my gosh, you got me through some of my hardest moments where I couldn't sleep," or I had never thought that my body belonged in a yoga space until you told me that I could, and to embrace
Mm,
my abundance. It's in those moments that I think that anyone who is committed to the work that they've done, they're going to do it regardless if anybody's watching or not. I remember the first yoga class I taught and no one showed up. And I practiced for the fullness of the time that I would have had that yoga class. And I came back the next week. And so I never started this saying that I want to be on the cover of Yoga Journal. That happened. That was a bonus. And I also thought that I was just like, oh, I want to do this and I don't want to be famous. But honestly, if not me, then who? And if not in this moment to share the work of building community, of understanding ourselves and expanding our capacity to be with ourselves so that we can understand and be with each other in more present ways, why wouldn't I take that opportunity? And so I think that that is what definitely keeps me grounded and connected to where when we do get in front of those big name clients who, millions of people are following them, it just makes it like, yeah, this is what I do. I'm grounded in this and I'm confident that I can support you so that you can show up and do what you do in the most
Hmm.
optimal way. And so I trust that I'm on the right path because I trust all of the steps that were ordered in order for me to be here right now.
Right, right. What's interesting though is that there's something really beautiful about this positive ripple that when you have influential people who have hundreds of millions of people following them,
Mhm.
and if they are open to sharing, right? And they are
Mhm.
Jennifer Garner, you have a whole bunch of people who are
Mhm.
happy to share.
Mhm.
That is the reach, right? Like
Yep.
how many more people, what, who desperately might have needed to be turned on to yoga. And in that moment, because Jennifer Gardner said something about
Mhm.
it, they're like, you know what? I'm going to check out
Yep.
Peloton. I'm going to see what this Chelsea's all about.
Yep.
Like, we don't know, but I agree with you that there is something so powerful about the positive ripple. And this is exactly what you want when, people will say, like, what's your desire in life?
Mhm.
And mine is always the same. Like, my dharma, my mission in life is to
Mhm.
reach as many people as possible and help them, teach them to
Mhm.
lessen their own suffering and increase their own joy and satisfaction
Mhm.
in life
Mhm.
through whatever it is they need to learn. If I happen to be teaching it, right? That's what I
Right.
hope is happening. And that part of why I've started writing books and doing other things and having more of a public life is because
Mhm.
having a private practice, you're like, I can reach this many people, but I want to reach so many more.
Mhm.
And
Right.
these public platforms are the way to do it, you know?
Yep, yep. Absolutely. And that was a part of the crossroads that I was at when I graduated from my doctoral program because I'm just like, okay, I did all of this work for a PhD. The logical thing is for me to go into the university. But like you just said, I knew that if I went out into the community, I may be able to reach way more people than I would have staying in the ivory towers.
Mm,
And we need the folks in
absolutely.
the ivory towers too to do the work. And so I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be planted.
Indeed. Boots on the ground. All right. I have
Yeah.
a question for you about boundaries because that
Hmm.
remains my obsession.
Yes.
Um,
Which I love.
which we all need. But what is for you? Like, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle? And
Hmm.
how have you overcome it if you have?
I think by nature, Terry, I'm quite introverted. I
Mm,
am an only child. I do yoga. I was a pianist. Like all the things that you can think of someone who has this type of personality, I that was me. And then there is this other side of me that when you see me get on a stage for yoga, something transforms and I just almost sometimes unrecognizable where it's just like wow, like it's just like light and day. And so I like to say that this experience has definitely, I will say that motherhood in particular, the
mhm,
challenge has been stepping back into coming out of that cocoon of
mhm.
postpartum, of maternity leave, of getting all of the goodness that comes with that first experience of being a parent and then getting back out into the world because I do have something to share. And I think it could be it is easy. I don't think it's very easy for me to just go and retreat and withdraw and have my own yoga practice, which was the one thing that I remember. I was trained in an ashram, my husband and I, with monks and swamis. And I remember, my swami talking about She could have chosen to go and be in the Himalayas and, practice and meditate and have a very beautiful life, but she chose to be in the city. She chose to be, in particular, working with folks who were dying of AIDS at the time of, in the
Mm,
70s and the 80s in particular. And I just think about that's how I want to show up. I want to show up that you can be a yogi, you can be out in the world. I can be a yogi who utilizes my voice. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't hold my tongue, especially when it comes to inequalities or inequities. I
mhm,
want to walk in a way that shows people you can be the both
mhm.
and you can do it in a way that maintains the integrity of who you are. So while I may still have those introverted moments,
Yeah.
I know that in order for me to share what I've been put here to share, which I know, planted here to share, is that I have to move those moments of challenge to get out there. So
And
it's
that is
great
yeah,
talking to you.
but that is the boundary struggle. You're
Mhm.
talking about literally how much exposure, right? The
Mhm.
boundary, the introvert in you would like less exposure,
Yep.
and the determined person in you who feels like you've got a dharma, that you've got a purpose, that you've
Mhm.
got something that that's important. You got to move those boundaries out a little bit, which can be challenging. And I think it's interesting that you say that you're an introvert, because I think a lot of people make a lot of assumptions
Mhm.
about introverts
Mhm.
that are not true. Some of my closest friends who have huge platforms are actually introverts, and
Right.
that they love what they do, but there's a certain amount of effort, and you need a certain amount of recoup time
Yep.
if you are an introvert after being very social.
Yeah, like literally in my physical body, there is a visceral reaction at times where I feel overstimulated or overwhelmed.
Mm,
And I know that this is the work that I still want to do. And so I just have to take care of myself because I want to do it. And so I just have to figure out, again, like you said, those boundaries and how to, as my teacher says, to drink as I pour.
mm. Yes, I love that so much. To drink as you pour. That is
Hmm.
correct. So, Charles, tell everyone where they can find you and what you're lit up about.
Absolutely. So I'm Chelsea Loves Yoga, which is how I started, elevating the stories of folks who weren't typically, talked about in yoga communities. And so Chelsea Loves Yoga website as well as social handles. And if you ever want to practice with me, you can find me at Peloton. And I just like to let folks know we are quite accessible. You do not need a bike or a tread. You just need the app, and I would love to practice with you there.
Ooh, I love it. Well, I want to say thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. I so appreciate what you're doing in the world. Keep up the amazing work, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Terry.